Hello, welcome to the overview of Iberian Rails. Iberian Rails is a cube Rails game, 2 to 5 players. Yeah, you can't play this solo. And honestly, the 2-player game, it does involve stocks, and stocks, I've never played it with 2. But anyway, the 3, 4, and 5-player game I played quite a bit, and I'm going to teach you how to play it here. I'll be doing another review that's called the Video Review Sallen Coefficient, and that's going to be actually my thoughts on the game. So if you're just looking for that, then skip out of this video and then go just check my other video called the Sallen Coefficient and Review of Iberian Rails. So in Iberian Rails, the players represent investors that are going to be purchasing stock certificates in the different railroad companies in the game. Every time you purchase a stock certificate, the money for that stock goes to the company, and then the player actually is going to take that stock certificate. They might add it to previously owned certificates. Like, for example, if this player purchased a second share in red and they were previously the CEO, they maintain ownership of the CEO. If you do purchase a stock where you have a tie with another player of how much you have, it's whoever was already the CEO that keeps their CEO role. And so basically, at the start of the game, you're going to start by auctioning off, and you always go from yellow, brown, on down to gray. This is always the order things go in. It's going from the top of the board here, which you can't really see, but yellow's up here, and then you go to this direction, then you start back down here and go this direction. That's always the order of company turns, and that's also the order that you're going to auction off at the start of the game, 1 share of every railroad company. Once you finish that auction, there's going to be money in every single one of these. Well, I guess supposedly. You can actually win for 0 at the beginning of the game, but that would be kind of strange. So when there's money inside of a company's treasury, the company is then going to take turns spending the money that's there. So you cannot actually spend your personal money in this game. You have to spend money that's already been invested in the railway, either by you or another player that's purchased a stock in that company. So once everybody's got a stock, or I wouldn't say everybody, because there's sometimes players can have 0 stock, but once all players at the table, once all railroad companies at the table have had 1 share of theirs auctioned off, then you're going to go into the next phase of the game, and it's going to be like the normal, this is the way you normally play the game. Every round you start with roll selection. Roll selection is going to be determined from a pool of rolls that are, there's like a diagram as to how you can set up the game, and it tells you, like, this is, you know, in a 2, 3, 4, 5 player game, how many of the rolls to use and which ones to pull from. You're always going to play with certain ones, and then there are other ones that can get shuffled together, though there is kind of like a base starting game, and this is the base starting game that I have set up right now. So like your roles that you see here, the inspector is in every single game, the hotelier is in every single game, the mafioso is in every single game. The ghost is only present in like more basic entry-level games, or if you're just shuffling all the roles together, it could be one of the random ones decided together with the engineer, construction mech. Banker, venture capitalist, and bureaucrat are all sort of ones that may or may not be in the game. But central to the gameplay is the inspector role, the hotel role, and the mafioso role. So when a player takes a role, they're going to then take the card of that specific role. Like, for example, here, the pink player has placed their player piece on the hotelier. The reason that this player piece is important is in subsequent rounds, you'll always start from the left and go to the right, and you'll be doing the role selection again. And the way that it works is you just remove the player piece, and then that player is going to choose from the available roles. So you cannot choose roles that players are currently on. So the way that kind of works out, you know, the player order, at least for role selection, is going to be determined by the order of the last round's role selection. So it's a way that you can continue to control at least where you're going to be choosing your different roles. I should probably talk about how you win the game. That is money. So you start the game with a certain amount of money based on players, and then whoever has the most money at the end of the game wins. You're going to continue through not a set amount of rounds, but you're going to continue through an amount of rounds until one company either totally maxes out the chart and hits 12 cities, or until there are 4 railroad companies that have no stock left in them. At the end of that round, and a round is once all railroad companies have taken their turn, then you will do a double payout for every single share, meaning you'll look at what the value of that company is on this handy-dandy chart. You'll do a double payout, meaning you'll double that, pay that to the player, add up all of your money, and add that to any previous money earned in the game, and then that's your final score. So the reason, or once you get done with role selection, let's go back to role selection, right? After you get done with role selection, then the companies are going to take their turn, starting with yellow and finishing with gray. That's just going to happen like that for the whole rest of the game, right? Role selection, companies' turns. Role selection, companies' turns until the game ends. On a company turn, the CEO, which is whoever has the first stock in the company, and then from that point forward, whoever has the most stock in the company, well, it can be taken from players. If a player purchases more stock than any other player has, they become CEO. Otherwise, it's all going to stay with that same player. So let's just say, though, that this orange player right here, which I have set up that you can't really see off screen, they have the only stock in the yellow railway, which is this one right up here. The yellow railway starts in this city, and you can tell because the cities on the map are color-coded to the specific railway. And then the yellow player has a decision on his turn based on the role that the yellow player selected. In this case, the yellow player has selected a really weird role. It's called the bureaucrat. And so his options are actually only to build rails, and his prices for building rails are incredibly high and exorbitant fees, because this bureaucrat is like a special role that's basically taken by a company that really wants to invest early. And so you'll place, you'll count how much money you have. If you have money enough to be able to build, you always have to spend it on building rails. And but in this case, the bureaucrat costs 40 and there's only 20. So nothing happens because the player's not able to take any of the other actions in the game. And instead, the bureaucrat's special ability is just to put 30 bucks into yellow's rails treasury. And now they've got 50 bucks, which is quite a bit to go off in the future. Let's just say on a subsequent round, orange has decided to choose a different role. Let's say that they chose the ghost. Yay! The ghost is going to be more of a normal role. Maybe this would have been better for my description to start with. Hey. So you'll see that there's this little diagram that shows you 10, 20, 40, 50, and 70. That's telling you if you want to build one rail, you spend 10 bucks, 2 rails, 20, 3 rails, 40, and so on. So the ghost is able to build rails. And the way that works is you're going to spend money from the treasury of that company to put out more trains in adjacent hexes, with your goal being to try to connect to more cities, because that's going to increase the payout of that railway. If you ever want to build into a city where another player already is at, let's say, for example, that green was here and here, and you wanted to pay, you would have to, for each one, pay $10 from yellow over to green. Except, since I've chosen the ghost role, the ghost is able to actually ghost other players and go on their spots without actually paying them. So I wouldn't have to do that, thankfully. Anyway, you continue to you get to take one action, which is either going to be building rails or auctioning off other shares, and then that company turn is over. When you want to auction shares, which is usually when there's not enough money left in the company, though there is definitely a lot of different strategies with that, you'll then choose either an open auction or closed auction, and sometimes your role is going to prevent you from actually doing one or the other. So like a ghost prevents you from doing a closed auction. It only allows an open auction. The mafioso, on the other hand, only allows a closed auction, that little money bag over there. It does not have an open auction, which is like a mallet. Several of the roles involve you being able to do either one, so either the open auction or the closed auction. And some of them, like the bureaucrat that I had earlier, don't allow you to do any auctions. When you do an auction, if you choose an open auction, it's just a basic, like, keep going around until every player has decided to pass. Player who wins it pays that amount of money to the company treasury and earns 1 stock, which they put in front of them. If you want to do a closed auction, that's quite different. Everybody chooses secretly an amount of money, which is why you've got these player screens, one of the main reasons, so you can secretly bid an amount of money, flip over your hand, count up how much you've bid. Whoever bids the most only, you don't lose bids in this game if you lose the auction. You only lose it if you win the auction. Whoever bids the most is actually going to pay the player that started the auction to their private treasury. So this does not really help the company. Instead, it's more helpful to the specific player that started the auction, and it gets that player some capital. Now, every auction in a way is kind of good for everybody holding stock, because immediately after you do an auction, you immediately do a payout, which is you look at how many cities that each railway is connected to, which you're tracking on this chart as you go, and then you give that much to every single share in the game. If the share is currently in a treasury, it still pays out, and it just pays out to that company treasury. So you can still get quite a bit of money even if you do a closed auction, if you've got a decent share price, you got a decent payout, and you have several shares left. But the amount of shares is not equal for every single one of these. The yellow railway only has 3 shares, which makes it very difficult to write it until late game. So anyway, like, your choices in the game are fairly simple. You're either going to build rails or do an auction. If you do either one of those, then your turn will be over as CEO, and then it goes on to the CEO of the next company in turn order. So you keep on doing that until you get to another role selection. Then you just keep on going back and forth. There is some things on the map that are, you'll notice that there are some yellow cities, and then there are some blue or gray cities. These yellow or gold cities are like tourist cities, and they only matter for the purpose of one of these roles. The hotelier is going to be in every single game, and what the hotelier does is immediately upon taking the role, allows that player to place 2 of their hotels anywhere on the board, as long as that space is empty. You can't go on any space that already has a railway or any space that is a city. You can't cover up cities. But now, once any railway builds onto your hotels, you'll look how many gold cities they're connected to at that moment. So let's say that blue built over to here and then built down to here. And you always have to build adjacent. And then was going to build onto one of Pink's hotels. This would get Pink 10, 20, 30 bucks immediately from the bank to personal stash. So you're able to get money for your hotels by building with railways. Another really crucial role that's in every single game is the mafioso. This is also something that I've heard of putting quite a few people off about the game. They think it is too interactive and powerful, and I will give my thoughts in my later on video, but my actual Sallen Coefficient. But let's just talk about the mafioso, what it does. It is extremely important to know that this is in the game, because if the person who's currently holding the mafioso role owns a stock in a company, they can actually pay a set amount of money determined by the current cities that are connected to that railway. They can pay that money from personal cash to the cash of the CEO, and now they're the ones that take over the company. So they can, as long as they have a stock, that's the biggest caveat. The mafioso cannot wrench control of a company unless that person owns a stock. So once you own the stock, though, and you take that role as the mafioso, you can do a closed auction and you're the one who gets paid. Or you can, take control of blue from another player and then build onto your own hotels. So the mafioso is a really important role that's going to be in every single game. Now, there is kind of a little bit of a counterbalance to that mafioso role, and that's the inspector. The inspector actually has a special ability where it can, during closed auctions, bid with a closed fist and bid 0. And that means that they're going to skim half of the profits of the closed auction for themselves instead of it just all going to the player that started the auction. So this kind of prevents players from just choosing closed auctions and just doing that the whole game to get lots and lots of money and get more money. So it's at least a little bit of a balancing aspect. Other roles that are present here in the game have different sorts of effects. Some of them are just focused on building lots, building for cheap. The banker is a pretty simple role where when you take the role, you just get 10 bucks straight up to your personal cash. But the banker is kind of inefficient if you look at how he builds. So anyhow, you'll keep on playing, like I said, until one railroad hits 12 or until 4 railroads are out of stock. And then you count up money, do that double payout, count up money, and whoever wins the game has the most money.